So what do the Jets do? Do they stick with Wilson, which it seems like they're going to do, and try to ride this out with that unbelievable defense? And listen, that defense talked the talk before the season started, and in the first 6 games, they've walked the walk.
And welcome to this week's edition of the 941 Sports Zone. I'm John Massoni here at Douglas Jeep for tonight's episode of the 941 Sports Zone podcast. Special guest tonight, which I'll get to in a few seconds here, is Mr. Rich Spedalari. Rich is are you the sports director, or are you just talent at this point, Rich, as far as...
Yeah, at WENG, I am considered and I'm going to put this in air quotes, sports director.
Yeah.
Of the radio station. I was actually instrumental in getting the Buccaneers to be on our airwaves this year. So, sports director. And I also do my show on every Saturday morning from 9 to 10 a.m. called Spits on Sports with Kerry and Company. And I've been doing more and more play-by-play. I'll be down to do the final regular season Lemon Bay at Northport game. Then also the first playoff game, and Lemon Bay is fortunate enough to win the second playoff game.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it is that getting close to that time of the year. Weather is changing. Everything goes. We always bring it up on the John Peacock Coaches Show as well. How everything is a little darker, a little cooler. Everything, and you get the feel now as it starts to change towards playoff season. And it's really, I think it's maybe the most exciting time of the year in regarding all football for me, because I get all three sort of hitting an apex. You got the NFL, you got college coming to the end of the year at that sort of in the same time. Things are kind of sort of straightening themselves out there, and then you have again high school, which is just fantastic. Always fun with the high school. Real quick, I'm going to recap last week's show. We had Jaden Glasser and Eli Jones, both of the Venice Indians, and they sort of were celebrating their district championship. They had just won the week before when they beat the Sarasota Sailors, and it was good to hear from both of them. Both very young, bright, articulate young football players, young men. And Jaden, obviously, with the opportunity to play at Central Michigan University, is where he's verbally committed to at this point. So it was a good conversation. Good to have him on here, and I think it's from a direction of the podcast, we do want to be able to give the young folks here in town or around the 941 area code an opportunity to shine and show their personalities and get themselves used to what will be someday a big part of their lives, where it's going to be discussing things that they're doing on the football field and maybe other places on media. If it's not podcasting, it's going to be radio and TV and whatnot. So good opportunity for us to have them on, a good opportunity for them to shine with that. I think, Rich, I'll go back to you now, knowing that you saw that with us at when we started doing the radio stuff back in the day with Coach Peacock, and we would bring players on, and it was always a very interesting, perspective. Some of the kids, had never had a microphone in their hands, and they responded very well, and it's kind of a neat process to see that sort of take place for some of those young guys early on in our process of doing all this stuff.
Well, you guys have done a tremendous job, in my opinion. You had the preseason, the media day, where you had as many coaches, and they brought a bunch of players, so they got introduced to that a little bit. I think you guys have done a tremendous job on that, and certainly a lot of these kids, a lot of them are going to play on Saturdays, not as many on Sundays, and at some point they're going to want to do something like this. Sports is in our blood. It's in your blood. It's in my blood. It's in their blood, and a lot of kids and younger adults, and even people that retire from the NFL, are actually going to the broadcast booth. So it's a very popular place to go, indeed.
And what we're doing here, podcasting in particular, is something that a lot of the athletes are getting involved in, because they can be they're local celebrities, maybe in 3 or 4 different towns. You have
right.
We use Trey Burton or Forrest Lamp for an example. I mean, Forrest said, when he was with us, he's like, my name is, I'm a big deal in Western Kentucky. If this podcast was happening in Western Kentucky, I might get 2,000, 3,000 people watch, that kind of thing. So those are the things that you hear about. And so these guys can be, if they're NFL players, they could do something, where the city they played in, as far as the NFL is concerned, they can go back home, like here in Venice, and come and do some things with Venice. And then, of course, where they flourished and thrived in at the college level. That's a big deal. And so those are the type of opportunities for those guys that they can really run with. And some of them, if you've seen, are making massive careers out of being analysts and guys in the media for the bigger networks, and even some things they're doing on their own and on the social media side of things.
Yeah, we see it a lot in the NBA. There's a lot of podcasts in the NBA. It's really picked up in the NFL. The most popular sports podcast, I don't think there's any question, is the podcast with the Kelsey brothers.
Right.
That was even before Tay came along.
Right. Right.
Certainly, they were entertaining. They really used the platform well to get their message out, and it's been a lot of fun to watch. I watch this podcast every week. It's been fantastic. The content here is great. You do a tremendous job getting really good guests. Like you say, you get some of the younger, some of the players on as well, but you got some media personalities. John Reynolds has been on a few times.
Yeah.
I really enjoy that. And everybody really had Pete on a couple of weeks ago, and he acted like he's not retiring.
Yeah,
which we know he is, but he acted like he's looking ahead to the next few years.
It's one of those things where sort of, when you're in the process of doing what he does in particular, it's a lot of work. He's got to be, he's got boots on the ground. And everybody thinks it's just a football game. No, it's every other sporting event that's happening on that campus as well. I mean, volleyball right now is back in their groove again at Venice High School, and he's got to make sure that that's all taken care of. And it's a lot of logistics to all those things. And it's after a while it can be draining, but at the same token, it becomes ingrained in you in some way. So the idea that the way he talks about it, sometimes it's true. It's like, I don't know how you detach yourself from that, unless you just have to be cold turkey and run like you're afraid of it, or run like your hair's on fire or whatever to get out of there. But he's just, like I said, it's one of those things where I think you reach a point where there is a saturation point. You're like, okay, I think I need to go, but still it is ingrained in you to still want to be around and peek at it and see how it's running.
Oh, Pete will be there every Friday night. Trust me, he's not going in.
No doubt.
He'll be there, and he'll also be on the golf course, and he'll be looking for your money.
No doubt about that. So anyway, we're here to talk a little bit about with your insight into Lemon Bay High School, and of course both of our insight into the local high school football scene. Let's just talk a little bit. You were down. You did the broadcast of the Lemon Bay game last week. We had talked a little bit this morning about when we were kind of previewing some things. Heading into a district championship scenario for Lemon Bay. Am I not correct when you said that this morning? Yeah,
Lemon Bay and Booker are playing Friday night. The winner wins Class 2S District 15. The second place finisher is runner-up and probably still in the playoffs, but you certainly want that district title. And, both teams have played pretty well. Lemon Bay suffered their first loss last week at the hands of defending Class 1S state champion First Baptist Academy of Naples. So,
right.
And they've got a couple of D1 prospects that are underclassmen. Watkins, their wide receiver, had 12 catches, and he's everything that has been advertised.
Yeah.
Somebody probably in this state is going to get themselves one heck of a 4 or 5 star player.
No, you're right. I had heard about First Baptist Academy. Again, friends that live down that direction, and they've done, and I would say in a relatively, consider maybe shorter period, they really propelled themselves way up in that 1S category.
Yeah, no question about it. And they're gonna, they're playing for their district title this week as well. Pretty much everybody is, except for Venice. Venice clinched a couple of weeks ago against Sarasota, so they're, just trying to get playoff positioning, trying to get that 1 seed. But everybody else in our immediate listening area is looking at getting that district championship. And in the case of Northport, they're just trying to rack up wins, and I believe they're going to play a bowl game down the stretch as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I would tell you that that they have done a heck of a job this year turning around the program by being independent, turning themselves around a little bit, and giving themselves a little bit of, I guess, confidence, more than any other word I could think of, to kind of turn it around and make it where you have a you have a situation where you're not going on the field with an expectation of getting, running clocked. That's hard. That's a hard thing to get past once you get there. And so great opportunity to go independent. They've won some games against teams that they'll see, as regular season foes when they do get back from the independents back into the FHSA playoff system. I think it's a really good thing my perspective. They did the right thing, and tough thing, but the right thing.
Absolutely. And Garen Belser deserves all the credit in the world. They lost the first game 43-0 to Parish Community. It could have been in that here we go again syndrome. We talked big in the preseason and we had a rough start. Didn't work out so well, but he got the boys together and he's changed the culture there. They not only hit the field, they now expect to win every week. And they were very disappointed talking to some of the people last week. They were very disappointed with the loss at Hardy. That's no slouch. Hardy, that's a tough place to play. You got to take a long bus ride. So they're doing it the right way. And when they get back into district play next year, I think they're gonna be a force to be reckoned with. They got a lot of underclassmen on that team.
They've never been in a lack for talent in that Northport.
Yes.
So it's just been a matter of trying to get things straightened out. Again, went through a lot of coaches. It didn't really work out in a lot of cases. And so it just was it was a tough transition. I think, again, making a tough decision, it was the right decision. And I think they're on their path. Back to Lemon Bay real quick, Rich. As far as the Booker matchup, what is Lemon Bay as far as their character of the team? What would you suspect that they're going to look to do in order to see if they can slow down Booker? I know Booker's got some guys on offense that can really, really tote the rock.
Well, one thing they have to do, which they didn't do last week, was kick the ball short, make them fair catch it when it's either a punting or kickoff situation, because obviously Booker's going to have the better athletes. But Lemon Bay, this is not your usual Lemon Bay team. One thing I did find out more intimately when I did the broadcast, they're total two platoon. I can't remember any time that they've had 11 different guys on offense, 11 different guys on defense. And the offensive line average is 260. For a school of that size, that's pretty darn good. So they can run the football. That's what they're going to try to do. They're going to control things on the ground with their, the wing tee. Everybody talks about it. But it really fits what Lemon Bay does, and they do it extremely well. Last week they got behind, they turned the ball over. You can't do that.
Yeah.
So, but I think this is a great matchup. Booker, you and I talked about this earlier. They're extremely talented, but they do have a little bit of a discipline issue. They've had several touchdowns taken off the board this year. And if that happens in this game, I think they'll come out on the short end. Yeah,
no, that's what I figured. Knowing how Lemon Bay had done stuff in the past, I know how they are going to play. They're going to make you play a solid game. You can't go in there and be sloppy and expect to win. And I know Coach Littles, when he was on our media day and one other time before that, he had expressed the fact that he knew he had a pretty talented team, but just needed to make sure that he could get him so that everybody's sort of on the right page. And that can be week to week sometimes. I always kind of jokingly say we forget sometimes that we're dealing with 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old young men, and sometimes their attention to detail isn't necessarily something that they are good with. Let's just say.
Yeah. And that's, they're taking the steps too. They get a very big lull for several years. And they've, at least talent wise, like you said, John, they're back to where they need to be. Now they just need to play the game the right way. And, we talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Playing the game the right way. I know Coach Peacock preaches that at Venice. I know Coach Southwell preaches that at Lemon Bay. They preach playing the game the right way. If you play the game the right way, good things will happen.
Right.
I don't think there's any question about that.
Right. No doubt about that. And then they said it's amazing how much you can get. How do I say this? How you can overcome shortcomings by doing it the right way. You know what I mean? Like you can overcome some things because you aren't starting from 1st and 20 or 1st and 15. You aren't taking scores off the board. You may not score on every possession, but when you're in the red zone, you make sure you get in the end zone or you get points on the board. If everybody scored every single time, the score would be 84-77. It's not happening. Right. So when you have a 28-24 game, the guy who had 28 probably was the one who took care of the ball a little better than the guy who had 24. And that's sometimes that's the outcome of these things. I used to do, I still do the stats, but I had a stat back in the day that if you're like under 3 turnovers or 2 turnovers, let's say, in a game, this percentage of winning goes way up, way up. And I'm talking like, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the best team out there. If there's even a chance that you're in the same spectrum of talent, you're going to win some games when you don't turn the ball over. It really comes down to it. And you mentioned earlier too about special teams. To me, that's a turnover sometimes when you get a long punt return and you kicks it back to where you just kicked it from, or even a touchdown from that. It plays like a turnover to me.
Yeah, it's hidden yardage, John. You look at the stat sheet. This team had X amount of yards. This team had Y amount of yards. But what are the hidden yards? The team B might have been outgained by 50 yards, but they might have had 170 hidden yards, and returns and things of that nature.
Right.
Field position. That's a big thing in these games as well. You have the short field. It's a lot easier. It's still high school football. The drive, the length of the field is really asking a lot of 15, 16, 17, and 18-year-old kids, 10, 12, 15 play drives. I mean, I know they happen, but, again, you're looking at a discipline issue. And eventually, with that many plays, there's more things that can go bad.
Yeah, no doubt. Just kind of a quick jog to the left on some things. Not a real comfortable situation to talk about because these guys do a really, they do a great job for the most part. But officials have had a little rough time down here in the state of Florida. I think they're having the rough times in a lot of different cases, and I know they don't get paid very much to do it. I know they are giving a lot of their own time, and they're doing it for the love of the game. But some of the things that have happened on the field, not so much. I'm not talking about holding penalties and stuff like that, but really inherently like not understanding some of some rule issues, and then of course being able to work the clock properly in some of the situations have cost some teams some significant games that could be affecting their playoff being in the playoffs and also affecting their ranking in the playoffs. Do you think, I guess the real point I want to make here is that, and then you see what you say, can there be a mechanism in place where there can be appeals to be made on certain situations that are outcome affecting, like a clock malfunction or something along those lines, that the game should have been over or could have been over in a situation? Or would there be some ramifications where it's not up to the local governing body to set the punishment out where they can be punished by the state of Florida? I'll leave that to you to answer that as well.
Yeah, well, there is supposedly a mechanism in place, and that's the FHSAA. And I use the word supposedly very loosely because there were 2 cases this year where there were egregious mistakes made. 2 that I know of. I'm sure there are more, but there are 2 that I know of in very high-profile games. One of them was in our area last week with Riverview. They were at the end of the game trying to kill the clock. Apparently, and a little better than I did some more research on this today. Apparently, they were trying to run the clock out. They were going to give up a safety. So they ran into the end zone. And apparently the clock officials at the game stopped the clock the minute he crossed the goal line. Well, the play's still alive until you actually get tackled. And that's basic stuff. You see, I think the problem is there's a couple of problems. One, we're short of officials. I think during the pandemic, I think a lot of officials decided not to officiate anymore for whatever reason.
Right.
That put a lot of games on Thursday night that make officials do 2, sometimes even 3 games a week if you add the JV games in, which is great for their wallet. But you really have to know the training is what really lacking at this point. And there's guys that are doing it, and like you said, they're doing it for the love of the game. They certainly aren't doing it for the money, but you have to know the rules, and you have an entire crew there. And I know the white hat is actually in charge, but the other guys do have a say. And if they know the rules wrong or the ruling is different, they need to speak up. And you need to have like a majority. And that's the Coco St. Thomas Aquinas game comes to mind as well, where apparently at the end of that game, everything was botched up to the point where they suspended that crew. Middle of the week following, they suspended that crew. I don't know how long exactly, but they didn't work for a little while. The game was at St. Thomas. Obviously, Coco thought they got jobbed. As it turns out, it looks like they really did get jobbed in that game. But again, the FHSAA is supposed to be there for appeals, but they don't seem to be. They're basically leaning on the, well, that's the way it was called on the field, so we're
Yeah.
just going to stick with that, no matter how egregious the penalty is. And therein lies the problem. There is a mechanism; it's not used properly, and you want to say something controversial. I'm going to say something controversial. The FHSAA is, God bless them. It's just an organization. I liken it to the NCAA. Really,
Yes.
I mean,
100%
um,
right.
there just seems to be very inconsistent rulings, and just I don't know. I'm just going to stop right there.
Yeah.
I'm just going to
Well,
stop right
there's a little bit of it's not my job. Like
there.
hey,
Right.
that happened. This is how we handle all this stuff. So if you're the appeal guy, and you're not going to listen to an appeal, then why even be that person?
Right.
And I
Dog
will,
and pony show.
and the thing that I will say to you as well, that I think really it really says a lot to me as well. You can't tell me that there were 5 or 6 the officials on that field in the Riverview game, and one of them did not know the rule, because I guarantee
Right.
one of them, if there somebody on that field probably knew and should have said, "You're all wrong, and this is the way it is." Okay. And if they argued back with me, I'd say, then you need to take an extra 5 minutes here and go look and find out what the rule is, because it means the end of this game or for somebody to win or lose. It's not a
Right.
judgment call on a spot where the ball is spotted. It's not anything like that. This is a clock management rule that you don't know that you did wrong, that cost somebody a football game. And again, and we all can, people can sit there and say, listen to these two guys talk about this, they're so worried about it. It's just a football game. Well, you tell that to the 55 kids that played for Riverview, or the 55 kids playing for Cocoa, and they're not going to get a home game, and talk to the AD who missed out on a payday that's going to fund his athletic department because he didn't get it. So those are the things that there is more to it than just it's a football game. There's a lot of ramifications to that, and the FHSA can't be the person that can hear the appeal. Not a sympathetic, well, that happens, good luck to you next time, pat you on the back and give you a lollipop and send you home. It's got to be like, no, okay, you made a mistake, and you need to go and get retrained. This crew can't be back. There's got to be a lot of things that go into that. And if you see consistent problems with some of these particular organizations, because there's a lot of them and they're all over the state, spotted here and there, they need to be called out on it. There can't be interpretations of rules or not understanding rules. That's the basics. I'm not gonna be worrying about their judgment. I'm worried about whether or not they actually know the rules of the game, which is sad. If that's not the case,
That is.
then you're really in a tough spot. Every coach is going to walk into every game with a lump in his throat, wondering what brand or what person, what referee crew is going to get that week, and that's not fair to the kids or the either team on the field.
No, I agree with that 100%. That know the game. I mean, if it takes retraining, if these guys got to go through some camps, I know, again, time is they're mostly volunteering their time. But if you want to, I mean, it's such a big industry in this state. The Florida high school football is such a huge industry. It has got to be somehow, some way regulated better.
I don't think there's a coach or an AD in our 3-county area who would have this conversation with us and would not agree that something needs to be put in place. I think that's the thing. I said, when the people that you're working for, and that's what the FHSAA are doing in so many ways to keep the games fair and equitable and whatever it may be, when the body of the people that you work for would agree with what we're talking about, then they need to really take a serious look at it, as opposed to wondering or worrying where the best deal they're going to get is to go play the state championship. By the way, that's Tallahassee this year. So, which makes absolutely no sense, because, if you want the best place to go, Orlando was the best place. Orlando or Tampa, you're in the center of the state. That's the best area. But we went from Fort Lauderdale, which was a good deal, a nice little spot, whatever it was, but still kind of far away, all the way to Tallahassee. So we're teeter-tottering. We're not keeping it level field. We're going, let's go extreme to the south, extreme to the north, and let's make it harder on the other guys to come up here and play for how many years, or at least this year in particular. I don't understand that decision making whatsoever. They should draw a circle in a certain area and say, this is where we're going to play. That's the bottom line, and then don't change. Just leave it as it is, and you can bounce back and forth from Tampa to Orlando. and you'd be fine. You'd be happy to do that. People would flock to the games.
Yeah, they would absolutely. It's definitely it hasn't been equitable in quite some time. And don't tell me there's not stadiums ready to use. There's numerous stadiums in the Orlando area that would more than cover the attendance. You got the UCF's home stadium.
Absolutely.
You've got Citrus Bowl. You've got plenty of places where this could be played. And I know when they used to have it at the Citrus Bowl, they're like, well, you'd have 12,000. It looked like there's nobody there. Well, you know what? The 12,000 were there. They were happy. It was in the middle. I agree with you wholeheartedly. When I saw Tallahassee, I kind of went, really? Yeah. Tallahassee couldn't do any better than that.
So. And that just goes to show you that they're living in a cocoon in Gainesville, and they're not really paying attention to what's going on. They absolutely they don't know what's going on. They just sort of sit there. It's just and they're just making decisions from a lofty place like a tower somewhere, and I don't think they know really what's happening on the ground. Which I would hope that they would, but I know they're limited. But again, these are simple things that they can fix, and it would be easy to keep the game, the integrity, and of course the competitive nature of the game fair. I think that's what we're talking about at this point.
Yeah,
it's a fair and equitable way to play the game. All right, Rich, we'll take our first break, and then I come back here. I am by myself here with Francis from Vibrant Aspect Media doing our podcast from Douglas Jeep as we do every week. We appreciate Greg Douglas and his whole crew taking care of us. They stay with us late, Rich. There's always one guy who gets the chance to stay and watch us pack up and get everything out of here. We try not to talk too much afterwards, but once you talk for a little while, you have to kind of slow yourself down in a way. You can't just hit the brakes. Right. So we do. Yep. We do appreciate them doing all the stuff for this. With that, we'll take a break, get for these messages, and come back and talk, Rich, a little bit about college football and a little bit about the Tampa Bay Rays as well. We'll talk a little about their season. I know you and I have talked before about the Rays, and I wanted to get your opinion as to how the season ended with them. With that, we'll take a break and be right back.
What does Douglas Jeep Chrysler Dodge Ram and Venice High football have in common?
The perfect team and the perfect lineup.
Douglas Jeep Chrysler Dodge Ram will always go the extra yard, so you can score big with the area's best selection and savings. So if you're looking for a championship vehicle lineup
and a dealership that tackles the competition,
visit Douglas Jeep Chrysler Dodge Ram in Venice.
And if you're looking for a championship football lineup, check out the Venice High football team.
Who supports Venice High football? Douglas does.
Back here on the 941 Sports Zone with Rich Spedalari from WENG Sports. Rich, we talked a little bit about some local stuff in regards to high school football and some of things, but let's get to the next level. We'll talk a little college football. Big weekend, I would say, last weekend, a transitional weekend for college football, where some teams were keeping on their hot streak, like Florida State, and some teams sort of hit a glitch, like UNC. And so I can tell you that's usually where things start to teeter. Some of these teams that look like they're going to be contenders sort of start to fall by the wayside, and that undefeated early season record turns into a 9-3 or 8-4 year for some of those schools. Where do you right now, as far as you're concerned, where do you see things as in regards to the Power 5 schools? Where do you see things going, and what are you crystal balling for the rest of the year in regards to the big schools?
Well, Georgia's got a very easy path to the SEC championship game, and it's certainly beginning to look like, even though they are struggling mightily at times this year, looks like Alabama's going to be on the other side. As much as we all think that the SEC is all that in a bag of chips and so much better than every other conference, this year I'm not so sure.
No,
I think only the champion gets into the playoff. I think even if Georgia goes into the championship game undefeated and gets beaten by Alabama, unless, of course, all these other teams continue to fall by the wayside. And you mentioned it, some monumental upsets. Virginia, one-win Virginia goes to North Carolina and beats the Tar Heels. Tar Heels had the inside track to play Florida State in the ACC championship game.
You got
now. I don't know who the
I mean,
opponent's going to be.
that's
Clemson has
terrible.
3
It's a
losses.
terrible
They
loss.
lost to
Yeah.
Miami last week.
Yep.
North Carolina's still got a good shot if they run the table, but Duke's got a shot. That Duke North Carolina game, the rivalry game at the end of the year, could determine who faces Florida State in the ACC. The Seminoles seem to be getting things together, although they got off to another slow start in Tallahassee the other night. But the defense is what's going to be the thing that gets them where they really want to go.
Yep.
And it played really, really well the last 3 quarters. Now, I know Riley Leonard, the quarterback for Duke, went out, but certainly they did what they had to do in that game. Big 12, oh, wow. You had that Oklahoma-Texas classic a couple of weeks ago, and then both teams struggled mightily to win.
Yes.
On Saturday. Oklahoma barely got by a UCF team that really has struggled defensively. Oklahoma only scoring 31 in that game. And Texas needed a late stand. And I was listening to that game on Sirius XM, and the Texas announcers actually announced that Houston had got the first down late in the game, but then they respotted the ball, measured, he was short, and then they didn't get it. So Texas escaped Houston. Houston's only chance, by the way, to get Texas in a conference game is Texas and Oklahoma are both going to the SEC.
Yeah.
Man, it's as wide open as I've ever seen it. I think Washington and Oregon obviously played a great game a couple of weeks ago, but Washington struggled a little bit. USC's out now, but they're going to play spoiler.
Yes.
They want to. It's these conferences are eating their own. So I guess the answer to the question is we still got a long way to go, 5 weeks to go to figure things out. I would say at this point, I'd be fairly confident in Florida State. After that, John, I really don't know.
Right. So I will tell you this. I at the beginning of the year, I thought so. I didn't think much of the SEC as compared to prior seasons. I didn't have any SEC team in the Final Four. I thought they were going to cannibalize each other. I thought Georgia was going to lose some late games, not the early part, but some later games. I thought they would lose, and I did not see Alabama being the team that's going to be that team that's going to do it again. And in both cases, it came down to quarterback play. I didn't think that either team had the quarterback that's going to carry you through to get there. And I also thought what was going to happen was I thought that there would be enough teams coming out of the other areas. I thought that I had USC going undefeated. I thought they were going to be the cream, and of course they've landed flat. I thought Michigan was going to come out of the Big Ten. I thought Florida State out of the ACC, and I thought Texas out of the Big 12. I really thought highly of Texas, and that sort of went to the wayside. So now, as we sit today, let's say that Georgia is number one. And maybe just because of what they've done over the last 25 games or whatever it's been now where they haven't lost. So I think it's one team in Georgia and 14 others that could slide into that spot. Somebody gets hot, the right win, the right loss, the conference championship, you name it. I think there's other teams, and they come from every other. They come from the SEC, they come from the Pac-12, they come from the Big 12, Big 10, I should say, Big 12 and ACC. There's still teams that are buzzing around that I think can make a case for themselves to make it, which I guess makes for an exciting brand of football. But I don't see anybody who's, other than Michigan, I'll give Michigan their due, who looks like a complete football team to this point.
Yeah, but who's Michigan played?
That's the point.
I'll give you they played a similar schedule to Georgia. We're going to find out a lot about Michigan in the next month. They've got Penn State. And I believe that game is in Happy Valley because it's a round robin, and I think all 3 teams had a home game. Penn State lost at Ohio State last week. I am not a James Franklin fan. No. He to me, he just shackles that quarterback. I think he's got a lot of arm talent, but I think he's the problem on game day. And Michigan usually just runs right over Penn State. If Michigan runs right over Penn State like they usually do in the game in a couple of weeks in Happy Valley, then I would say, yeah, Michigan's right there. And that Michigan-Ohio State game Saturday after Thanksgiving is going to be everything that we all hope for. And again, the way the Big Ten set up with the last year of divisions, the winner is going to get somebody in the West that they're going to be a 3-touchdown favorite against.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's a dog and pony show there. So I guess I was remiss to mention the Big Ten teams, but
no,
I agree with you. It's all about quarterback play.
Yep.
And I had somebody on my show, a college football expert, on Saturday, and we were kind of talking about the quarterbacks midway through the season. Caleb Williams, the last 2 weeks, in my opinion, I mean, he's a slam dunk #1 pick, but I've seen a few things these last couple of weeks, John, that give me pause.
I'm not a
The
fan.
Notre Dame game, as things unraveled, he unraveled.
Right.
And you don't want to see that from your quarterback. And he was all night prancing and stomping up and down the sidelines, getting upset at his receivers and, everything and everyone else. And to me, that's not the look you want from a leader.
Yep.
Shedeur Sanders at Colorado has certainly emerged, but the last couple of weeks he's had some issues as well. The kid to keep an eye on is Jaden Daniels out of LSU. Now, listen, LSU's not going to do anything because their defense is god awful.
Right.
I mean, they still have a chance, I guess. If they beat Alabama, then they have a chance to represent.
They're one of those
the West
14,
in the
15 teams who could figure it out. You know what I mean? They
Right.
still got a chance.
Yeah. And they've already got 2 losses.
Yeah.
And really should have had 3. They should have lost to Missouri, but
yes, indeed.
And Missouri, there's another. The 2 best quarterbacks in the SEC are Daniels from LSU, and I'm remiss, I can't think of the kid's name from Missouri. They're by far the 2 best quarterbacks in the SEC. I don't think it's even close. I'm not a big, Dart fan from Mississippi.
No, there's nobody else.
The kid at Arkansas has terrible footwork. That's what it's going to come down to. And let's reel it in locally, because I know you're a Gator guy. You're heading to Jacksonville this week. This next couple of weeks is going to say a lot about the Gator season. They got to 5 wins. To me, that South Carolina game was a growing up game, a road win where they trailed by double digits in the 4th quarter. Graham Mertz, you can say whatever you want about him. He nutted it up in that game. I thought, Florida, they gave up 39 points, but the defense, when they had to, came through. And they've got to the 5 wins. So now, obviously the Georgia game, they're two touchdown plus underdog in that game.
And rightfully so.
Be competitive, and take care of business the next week against Arkansas and get bowl eligible. And then everything else is gravy, because if they don't beat Arkansas, then the schedule gets really difficult, and it gets hard to find a win.
There is very hard to find a win, and we can go through their schedule, but you're 100% right. It's difficult to get to there. And I agree with you regarding the quarterback play. I am not a Caleb Williams fan. I would not put my NFL franchise in that guy's hands. He's already sort of using whatever leverage he has, and you can't let that. Football's not a game where that kind of personality can really be in a leadership role. It's not going to work. Right. He walks around, he broods, he's constantly rubbing his head. He breaks the play down on every snap. He's not a guy to stand there and go from the pocket. He wants to run 30 yards backwards and make a play and do whatever he wants to do. He's running around on his I don't think Lincoln Riley has coached him one bit. I think he saw a talent and he bought into it, and then he followed him, or they followed each other to USC because they were going to both cash in on their notoriety or whatever it was, more NIL money in LA as compared to Norman, Oklahoma, whatever they did. So that's a real problem. And I also agree with you what you said about James Franklin. I made a comment to somebody earlier today and said, you tell me the difference between a Penn State team run by James Franklin in 2023 and a Penn State team coached by Joe Paterno in 2002. They look exactly the same. A handcuffed quarterback, a plotting offensive game plan, usually one talented guy on the outside, and when they're good, they have a really good running back and a solid defense, and they want to win games 20-18 or 21 to 10, and they blow out whoever they got to blow out, the Temple or somebody they blow out during the year. They're playing the same way they played when they were basically a Big East school, so to speak, and they're playing the Big Ten, and they're just a notch below where they need to be. They're a top 20 team, and I don't know if it's a cultural thing at Penn State, but there is some stuff that really sort of doesn't make any sense to me. They just look like they're always going to be the guy that almost got there, and until they can make some sort of change culturally or something where they're going to go out and go win some games, they're going to keep losing to Ohio State the way they lost to Ohio State, and then it's going to be that way forever. So it is an interesting situation, and I think you're right on. It's going to be chaos for the next few weeks going into Thanksgiving, and things won't really shake out until the championship games are
Yes.
settled. And you'll see how that works out, which again, from a fan perspective, it should be very interesting to see how it all plays.
I totally agree. We talked a little bit about Florida State and what they're doing. Miami, that was a nice win against Clemson in double overtime. That's kind of a program builder, and that Miami's going to go to Florida State with some swagger. I mean, that's a dangerous game for the Seminoles. It's always a dangerous game for the Seminoles when they're ranked number 1 and been a 20-point favorite. They've lost in that game, so that's going to be a tough game. The two local schools, the UCF, they've really life in the big time. Not exactly what they thought it was going to be. Liked the effort, liked everything about the Oklahoma game except the final score. I thought they played extremely well. I think they'll get some wins down the stretch. I don't know if it's going to be enough to get bowl eligible. And USF's doing the right thing. They built on that Alabama game, got a couple of nice wins. Yeah, the homecoming blowout to FAU was not exactly a great look, but they came back and got UConn, got a game they could have, and they've got a decent shot with the remaining schedule they got. I could see a path to 6. They've got Temple, who's really, really bad. FIU, they've still got games on their schedule that are going to be winnable games, and I think USF, if they get to a bowl, I think that's an extremely. Alex Golish is doing a tremendous job. Again, we talk about it with Northport. You talk about it with all these programs. You got to change the culture first.
Right.
He's changed the culture.
Right.
Now the wins will start coming. If you get to a bowl game, that is gravy. For a 6-6 program like that, a bowl game is a fantastic thing, and that's why I still like the bowl system. But we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. But the in-state teams are doing what they need to do. Florida, I think, is on the come. I really do. They get themselves a quarterback in the next couple of years, and there are quite a few around. One's just to our south, John, down at Bishop Road.
Yeah.
The kid Smith, that's a junior, that's going to be in the playoffs. I mean, he's pretty much narrowed it down to the 3 big in-state schools: Florida, Florida State, and Miami. Florida's got to get him.
Yeah.
They really do. He's the kind of kid that, he's a prototypical quarterback, big arm. I think he's a guy that could bring the Gators back to the promised land.
I agree. And then you're right about the culture change. And I will give Graham Mertz his due. Way, way, way overachieved from what I expected from him. And kudos to him. And again, now it's up to Billy Napier to sort of grow on that. To go back to that South Carolina game real fast. He finally did what I was hoping him to do. He didn't try to win it. He went out and grabbed that game away from South Carolina.
Yes.
So, and that hasn't been the path before. When he's been bound before, he's sort of like, hey, we'll do this. We'll keep it tight. We'll run clock. He went out and won a 41-39 game that meant a lot to the program. And he did it in a manner that was much more conventional than what he was doing in the past. So give him credit for that as well. Rich, I'm going to skip over one of our things we were talking about. I'm going to go right to the Rays real quick because I want to get your opinion on this real fast. Rays out in the first round of the playoffs. We've talked about the Rays in the past. Quick question for you. Did they overachieve this year, or are you disappointed more about how the way it ended? What's your tack one way or the other?
Well, with Texas, as we record, getting ready to play a Game 7 against Houston, and they dispatched to the Orioles, I stepped back. I think they overachieved. I think the 99 wins was huge when you consider all the pitching injuries, when you consider the Wander Franco situation. The fact that this team won 99 games is incredible. That being said, they got to fix this playoff thing. Not scoring runs in the playoffs, that's kind of gotten into their head now. And Kevin Cash has got to drill in them all year long. Listen, the Rays are a low budget team. They overachieve every year. They get to the playoffs, but in my opinion, now they've got to do something. They got to the World Series in the COVID year of 2020, but they've got to win a series, even maybe 2 series, to take that next step. You can't just sit there and be standard. But I would say overall, I'm fairly satisfied with the season, especially with what the Rangers have done after that. I don't know about I don't know about you, John.
Yeah, I think they overachieved as well. I think that what they have to do with their team though is they got to find, if not every year, or get somebody on the team who's been there, done that. They need a guy in that roster. It just can't be a bunch of guys who are journeymen or young guys. They get into these playoff scenarios, and I think the pressure's a little hot for them, and they're not they're trying a little too hard. Pitching doesn't show up as well, and I think if you have a guy in there who can settle them down and be the guy who's the middle of that lineup who can do some stuff for them, and I'm not saying a $60 million guy. I'm talking about somebody who's there's guys out there that have been there. I mean, I can name look at Schwarber on the Phillies. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, he's hitting home runs, doing whatever, but he's been there. He knows what to do. And you got to have that. I believe you have to have that just for the race to keep going forward. With that, I'm going to ask you another question, go a little bit further. MLB playoffs. Is it, with a short series, and of course now in the middle of football season, is the playoffs getting a little lost this year? I mean, on you, or are you tracking it hard, or what's the deal with you as far as the MLB playoffs are concerned?
They've got an issue on weekends. I can tell you that right now. I barely watched over the weekend. I did hear about the bench clearing brawl in Texas, so that got me to turn it on. I guess maybe Rob Manfred sent the message to Arlington and said, "Boys, we need to get some viewership."
Some chin music to somebody. Yeah,
exactly. But seriously, in the middle of college football and the NFL. It's a tough sell, and then you play these 5:00 games. That's rough. I'm sorry, that is rough. They've got to figure this out. And here's the other thing they got to figure out, John. All these series, all the 5-game series were short, so they had a break, a too long of a break between the end of those series and the beginning of the other series. Now, the fact of the matter is, they started on Monday. That was proper, but this has got to get constricted. And if it means going 154 games, and I know that's sacrilegious to the owners, they've got to figure a way out to get the World Series done in October. The only way the World Series gets done in October, John, is a sweep. If not, we're playing games in November. That's too long. And Saturdays and Sundays, I'm sorry, it gets buried, especially with it being on TBS and FS1. Major League Baseball has to fix that.
That is, I can't have to look for it. Okay.
Correct.
I have my little button I hit and see what's on TV and flick over to but that's what I'm looking for, the Pac-12 game at 10:00 on a Saturday night, not the NLC, the National League Championship Series. You know what I'm saying? That should be right in my face. That should be right there. And it's not. And I think that's the problem big time right now, is that it's getting lost because it's not being put. If I'm the MLB, I'm like, hey, I'm big time here, guys. Why am I playing second fiddle to Houston versus Texas in college football or whatever it may be? Why do they get the 4:00 spot on a Saturday? Why am I not getting that? And why is that game not going to FS1? That's what I think the big problem is with them as well. They're not really getting that marquee game. They're not being the ones out in front. Rich, we're going to take our last break of the night real quick. Come back and hear if you're ready for it. A What's Bugging Me segment from you, if you want to jump in there with that. And we thank Truly Nolan for being the sponsor for What Bugging Me. We always appreciate the fact that they took the risk and said, we'll go ahead and put our same name on a bug segment on a local podcast, but they did, and we appreciate that from them. So, Rich, we'll be right back here for a little wrap up and What's Bugging Me segment after these messages.
What does Douglas Jeep Chrysler Dodge Ram and Venice High football have in common?
The perfect team and the perfect lineup.
Douglas Jeep Chrysler Dodge Ram will always go the extra yard, so you can score big with the area's best selection and savings. So if you're looking for a championship vehicle lineup
and a dealership that tackles the competition,
visit Douglas Jeep Chrysler Dodge Ram in Venice.
And if you're looking for a championship football lineup, check out the Venice High football team.
Who supports Venice High football? Douglas does.
Back here at the 941 Sports Zone at Douglas Jeep, and we thank Truly Nolan for sponsoring our What's Bugging Me segment. And Rich, real quick, one thing before we get into What's Bugging Me, talked a lot of football tonight. anything, one particular thing sort of surprised you? And like, that could be from high school, college, or NFL in particular. Anything that sort of surprised you up to this point where you said like, man, that's the one thing that floored me when it happened, or where somebody stands as far as their record is concerned? Anything surprising you in particular?
I'm going to go right to your Jets being 3-3 without a quarterback. They went into the bye week, big win against Philadelphia. The division's falling apart around them. Miami, they have 5 wins over teams that have a combined total of 8 wins on the season, and Buffalo just imploded yesterday against the New England Patriots. Can't stop the run. They're missing Matt Milano big time. That division is to be had.
Yes.
So what do the Jets do? Do they stick with Wilson, which it seems like they're going to do, and try to ride this out with that unbelievable defense? And listen, that defense talked the talk before the season started, and in the first 6 games, they've walked the walk.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any question about it. One of the best defenses I've seen in quite some time.
And some of the things they've done without Sauce Gardner in the lineup and DJ Reed, which is that's a big deal. Really, I do agree with you. They have been a very surprising team in particular. For me, I could tell you the truth. I don't have an NFL or high school surprise. My surprise in regards to everything going on in college football is the fact that we don't have the pedigree teams really pulling away. That's the surprise for me. I thought that you always have the cream of the crop. You got 4 teams or whatever. Again, Michigan has a lot to be left to say. They haven't really played anybody yet. Georgia is not a very dominant number 1. They sort of turn it on when they need to. That's going to catch up to them. Alabama's on the down, slope. Texas didn't show up like I thought they were going to show up. So there's some schools and some things out there that I haven't seen that front runner that I feel like, hey, it's going to be these teams are out there. They're going to do this, and that's been surprising to me because that's been the MO for the last 20 years in college football. Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, you've had these schools that you're like, hey, they're going to be the ones that make it, and it hasn't happened yet so far. That's been a surprise for me. All right, what's bugging you, Richie? If you got one, lay it on me right now.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to the FHSAA, and they're going to probably deny my credentials to do that playoff game. But they got to do a better job of separating the teams. In other words, the districts, this metro and suburban split. I hate it. I hate it with a passion. I'm from Ohio, so it's a little bit more old school. But I think you got to have parochial and non-parochial schools. The parochial schools have such an advantage.
Correct.
It's not even funny. I mean, I would be very surprised if Bishop Monroe is not in the Final Four or in the state finals. And the reason for that is we had some damage from the hurricane and some things haven't happened governmentally, and they're doing everything on the up and up. There's no question about it. But they're able to get players that other teams are not, and a lot of parochial schools are like that. I think when they realign next year, I think they got to do something like that. I have no problem. Obviously, Coach Peacock is a perfect example. He has no problem going to Miami and playing a Miami team. He has no problem going down and playing Aquinas. All right, he's competitive with all of them. It's just, and Aquinas would fall into that parochial category.
Correct.
So you've got to, in my opinion, that's the way you got to get the teams that legally can recruit and put them in one basket and then everybody else in the other basket. And the FHSA has got to figure out a way to do that, get some competitive balance, because it's not good. I could look at the brackets right now. The brackets aren't even out, and I can tell you who's going right away. So
right. And you're right. And they put their toe in the water with this idea with suburban metro to try to appease some of the suburban schools that feel like they didn't get a shake at it, but they didn't really do anything at it. They didn't really do anything to really make it where it should be, which is exactly what you said. There needs to be the parochial, or as they say, Catholic League, or whatever you wanted to call back in the day, that in public school, and you have that, and they play each other during the year, and then they play for their own championships down the road, and then that's the fair, equitable way to do it, no doubt. For me, what's bugging me is sort of what we talked about a little bit before, is these college football teams that tease us early that they're going to be good, expectation of being really good, and they just don't. They fall flat, and it seems to be perennial with some of these teams. I put down 3 teams and down before: Tennessee, North Carolina, and Penn State. My goodness, Tennessee comes out against Alabama and looks like they got it going on, and all of a sudden, just Josh Heupel, like he forgot how to coach, like whatever, he ran out of plays or something, and it just ended. And you had a quarterback and what's his Milroe, the kid from Alabama. He's not ready.
No rope.
He's not a Division I quarterback. I'm sorry.
Right.
He's really not. And he can make some plays, but that was just, I thought, for Tennessee's sake, where they could have really made a statement. They just fell flat, and I wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee goes on to lose 2 or 3 more games. I think they're gonna throw in the towel. UNC, North Carolina, again, an embarrassing loss to Virginia. Any way you slice that, took them sort of out of the race, if you want to call it that. And again, Penn State looks like the same Penn State we've seen for 20 years. They get there, they play the good team, they play a quarter or so. It's just not there. The completion percentage is somewhere around 30%. They got a guy run for 60 yards, and they score 9 points, and they can't beat anybody that's in the top 10. It's just doesn't look good. I will say also, I'll lump this into it as well, is the entire Pac-12 is a tease. I mean, Washington.
You think so?
I think what I saw, Washington a little lucky against Oregon. That's going to happen some games. I thought them playing Arizona State and not doing very well against them, and Penix looked average in that game. I just think that anybody at this point can beat anybody, and that doesn't bode well for them getting a shot in the championship. I think the best team in the Pac-12 is Utah. I like Utah because they play physical football. They play a different brand of football, and it's not up to the weather. It's not up to a guy being hot. It's not any of that stuff. They're good. I mean, Oregon, do you trust Bo Nix? I don't, but I mean, that's just how it is.
Isn't he in like his 9th year, John?
He is. And it looks like he wants to stay forever. I think he's very happy being a college quarterback. I don't think it's a road for him in the end to the NFL. I think he's very happy with that. All right, Rich, do you have a prediction for tonight, or are you going to just let it go at your What's Bugging Me segment?
No. I'll say that. I'll say that Texas is going to win the World Series. I think Texas is going to find a way to win. Again, this is Monday night. You guys can see this on Wednesday and be like, well, what a fool. But I think Texas finds a way tonight. If they don't, Max Scherzer needs to just hang them up.
Right.
He just needs to hang them up because they've been in every game except the one he pitched in Game 3, and he's going to toe the rubber tonight. I think if Texas gets the World Series, I think they're going to be the World Series champs.
And real quick from me, Florida covers. They against Georgia. I think that they are good enough. I think that it's going to be a matter of it may be a little luck, but if Carson Beck doesn't play an outstanding game, tell me the superstar on Georgia's offense right now, and you're going to say
he's hurt.
He's hurt. Exactly. That's a huge issue for Georgia. Really big. And I know Florida's defense. Get off to a
good start.
Florida's defense looked bad.
The Gators don't need to be down 14-0 8 minutes into the game.
Florida's defense does not look good in the last few games, but I will tell you that with that situation, it could be a very tightly contested game, or in that game. And I think it'll come down to. I think it's going to come down to whether Florida can believe enough that they can keep themselves in it, and a turnover or 2 here and there. And I think Beck is the kind of guy who could do that. I think he's ready for that game to happen. So we'll see. All right, Rich, that's another podcast for us here, and another opportunity for you to be on with me. And I always try to reciprocate for you on your side on Saturday. So we do appreciate you coming on here and giving your opinions. And we hope to have you on here multiple more times as things go forward.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I certainly enjoy it. I love the podcast format. It's free flowing, and we get to say what we want. And I think it's fantastic. And you guys have done a tremendous job growing the 941 Sports Zone brand. And anything I can do to help you, I mention it on my show pretty regularly about hearing this on this show, and that it is a really, really good show. If you're from the 941 and you're not in the 941 area, you'll learn a lot. From the 941 Sports.
I appreciate that, and again, it's fun. We always, you're sort of the mentor for all of us here in the media part of things that we do with the Venice area, Venice football, and all that stuff. So we do appreciate you as well. With that, Rich, we'll say goodbye to you and say goodbye to everybody out there watching, and we'll see you next time here from Douglas Jeep on the 941 Sports Zone. Have a good one.